Hi guys, welcome back to Prose Amongst Thorns. Today I'm going to be doing my January wrap up. I managed to read 8 books in January and I didn't set myself a TBR, which I have done for February, and there is a video of that, of my new TBR game that you can check out. But yeah, I didn't set anything for this one. I just decided to read whatever I felt like reading. And there was a lot of arcs as well. The first book I read this year was Over the Top by Jonathan Van Ness. This is his autobiography or memoir. I don't really know the difference between the two, I've got to be honest. But yeah, it's written by him about his childhood and his life so far. And it's actually really interesting. I ended up giving it a 4-star. The only thing that wasn't it was very much in Jonathan's voice, which was a good thing and a bad thing. Like, it didn't feel ghost written and it didn't feel like it had been heavily edited, but some of it was kind of hard to read with very sort of long, convoluted sentences, and it really did sound like Jonathan's voice. And I think if I'd listened to it in an audiobook, I probably would have enjoyed it even more, because I think it didn't translate quite as well into the book as if he was saying it, if that makes sense. It's really important to read about his struggles as a HIV positive person, and just learning about his relationship with gender, sexuality and all of that. I think it was really interesting to just find out more about him and see behind that sort of smiley, very bubbly and just lovable character that we see on Queer Eye. So I really enjoyed it, and I would certainly be interested in reading any other further biographies he does about his the next stage in his life. But yeah, all in all, this was a 4-star read for me and I really enjoyed it. The second book I read this month is Love is for Losers. I read this as part of Pride Tours, who I think they are an amazing book tour company who solely send out books with LGBTQ plus representation for readers to review and to feature. Love is for Losers follows Phoebe, who's our main character, in her sort of diary-esque blog entries. She essentially thinks that love is for losers, that anybody who falls in love just becomes like a mindless zombie, and why would anybody want that, and it's just basically really horrible. She has a difficult relationship with her mother. So it's a queer, sex-positive, coming-of-age romance, and I just love it. It's kind of like sex education, but written for teens and or young adults, and it is just really fantastic. It perfectly balances this dry, witty humour from Phoebe, who is absolutely hilarious, and I loved her as a protagonist and as our narrator, really. And it balances that with some really heart-wrenching and emotional moments. She deals with a lot in this book. The arc of the book was 500 pages long, and I will say that the published version is a lot smaller, but so is the writings. I devoured that book. I did not want to put it down. I was laughing out loud. I nearly cried, and it was despite being the second book I read this month and this year, I know already it is one of my top books of the year, and it's definitely my favourite book of January. So this one is undoubtedly a 5-star from me, and I highly recommend you read it if you're looking for a queer coming-of-age romance that features sort of coming to terms with sexuality. This one, it's brilliant, and it has cats in it, so what more could you want? It's fantastic. I highly recommend this one. My third book of the month was 1,000 Ships by Natalie Haynes. I read this as a buddy read with Rosie's Bookshelf on Bookstagram, and it was just so good. Both of us just kept adding pages and just being let's read further today, because it's one of those books that you can't put down. Essentially, it's like a feminist retelling of the Trojan War, but less so focusing on the actual war and what happens afterwards, with sort of flashbacks and flash forwards, and all told through the eyes of the women involved in the story. I found it a really enlightening read, which I think added depth to the story. I feel like I know quite a lot about the Trojan War. My sister is heavily into Greek mythology and particularly obsessed with the Trojan War, and she loves the film Troy. So yeah, I think that knowledge really helped, because otherwise it can be quite jarring, because you just jump to characters that it doesn't give them any background. You just like go to their point of view and learn about their story. It was a really, really interesting read and I really enjoyed it. One of the things I really enjoyed as well was the narrative of Calliope, I think, who is one of the Greek muses, and I think she's the muse of poetry. And she essentially narrated the story, but via an old Greek man. And he almost like resists telling the story of these women. And she's like, come on, I'm giving you these ideas and you need to write them how they really are, like with these women as central, strong, beautiful, amazing characters. And it definitely delivers. For me, this was undoubtedly a 5-star read, and I cannot wait to read more from her, because I know that she does write quite a few books like this, and I'm definitely going to pick them up. The next book I read was another 5-star read for me, and that was Daughters of Night by Laura Shepherd Robinson. I loved this book. I got it as an ARC on NetGalley. I was just intrigued by the premise, and last year my favourite book was The Doll Factory, which was a historical fiction, romance, crime thriller type thing, which I'd never read before. Daughters of Night is essentially the same thing but without the romance. It's like a gritty, it's a really interesting crime thriller mixed with historical fiction. You have vivid and lovable characters, which I was just obsessed with, like, and the crime aspect was so well written. I never saw the plot twist coming, no matter how much I thought I knew what was happening and knew who the murderer was. There was always something that came out of nowhere and completely surprised me. I can't really say much about this one without giving it away, because the best parts of it are the plot twists, and some characters that you love end up being characters that you don't love so much, and characters that you might dislike might be characters that you end up really liking by the end of it. So it was a really fantastic book. That it was another one of those that I sat down and just could not stop reading it. Like, I was so obsessed with it. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was undoubtedly a 5-star, and thankfully Stacey from Bookstagram, who I'll put everyone's links that I've talked about like down below. She has thankfully lended me the first one in the series, because I did not know it was a series, and I'm obsessed with this world that has been created and I want to live in it longer, and I really hope there's more books coming that feature these characters, because Caro is such a lovable, flawed protagonist that, like, I want to know what happens to her. I want to know, like, where her life is going now. The next book I read was a book called Charlotte by Helen Moffet. This book was only a 2-star read for me. I did not like it at all. It is essentially a imagining of what would happen following the events of Pride and Prejudice, focusing on Charlotte. It's interesting, and I don't like Pride and Prejudice, so I feel like that has affected my view, because I just wasn't that invested. But if you ask me to tell you what the plot is, there is no plot. It's just like her baby dies, and that's not a spoiler. It starts like, that's how it starts, and then it's just that's it. That's kind of the only thing that happens, and I wasn't really there for that. Like, I wasn't invested in the characters or the story or the plot, and I just think there was a really like missed moment to have a queer romance between two of the characters, and that really frustrated me, that there was all this allusion to something more going on and then it just like turned into nothing. I read this as part of a book club, and I'd say that they kind of had the same view. We were kind of 50-50, people who loved it and thought they can't wait to read the next one because she is writing a second, and people like me who were just like, it's a 2-star, it wasn't awful. And I think, like I said, if you like Pride and Prejudice, you should definitely check it out. But I just feel like there was so much more they could have done with the story that would have made it a little bit more interesting, maybe. Book number 6 is A Burning by Megha Majumdar. And I'm really sorry, I've probably said that wrong. I should Google how to say people's names before I start. But anyway, this book was part of the Kaleidoscopic tour, obviously. So they kindly gifted me this copy in return for a review, and I actually really enjoyed this book. I think I gave this one a 4-star, but it was a really close tie between 4 and 5. So if I changed my mind, I'll like put the actual star rating here, but I'm pretty sure it's 4-star. I found this book really moving. It deals with corruption and terrorism in modern day India and or contemporary India, as a smart person would say, Amy. We follow the story of Javan, who gets sort of caught up in this terrorist plot. As far as we know, she's innocent. And we also have these side characters or other protagonists of PT Sir and Lovely. Lovely is a transgender woman who wants to become an actress, and she is the key to Javan getting her freedom. And you also have PT Sir, who is a teacher who's suddenly sort of wrapped up in this political world. And as Javan's life gets worse, PT Sir's gets better. Lovely essentially has an ultimatum of she has to choose between her friend Javan, who taught her English and just really supported her when no one else would, and her future as an actress. And it's just a really moving read. It's a really extraordinary political fiction that really forces you to think about corruption in the modern world. And I don't want to spoil the ending, but I will say that I nearly cried. It was so moving and unjust is all I'm gonna say. Like, that's a bit of a spoiler, but that I can't say anything else about it. I'll also say that the only reason why I think, looking back now, it's not a 5-star, or the reason if it is a 5-star, like something I didn't like, was just the pacing. I felt like it starts off like really just sort of suddenly it grabs you and pulls you in, and then there's kind of a lull towards the middle, and then everything happens in sort of the last 30 pages, and I think that really helps, because it helps it feel so sort of rushed and unjust, and it aids what happens in those final like 50-ish pages. But I feel like I wanted more explanation. I wanted to peek behind that curtain. All in all though, in terms of a debut, it's astounding, and I think it's a fantastic book, which I do highly recommend you read, particularly if you're interested in political fiction. The next book I read was Badass Habits by Sincero. This book is amazing. So I read this as part of a tandem read-along, and it was absolutely life-changing. Essentially, it gives you a 21-day program to follow that will allow you to either build up a new habit or get rid of a bad one. So I worked on moving my body more. I wanted to be vague because with lockdown and everything going on, and I have health conditions as well, I can't just like go for a run every day or go for a walk every day, because sometimes like I can barely stand up without being in pain. So for me, it was just moving more, whether that be going for a run or going for a long walk or cycling or doing some yoga or a 7-minute workout. I just wanted to make sure that I was giving myself that time. And I found it so much easier following this like program than if I had done it on my own. So I highly recommend that. If you're looking to like change your habits, you want a self-help book that doesn't feel preachy, then this is the one for you. The final book I read in January was a bit of a letdown for me. So book number 8 was How We Are Translated by Jessica Johannesson. I just didn't like the book, I'm afraid. I gave it a 2-star overall. One of the things I didn't like is I just didn't know what was happening. I didn't read the blurb properly, I guess, because I thought it was a non-fiction examining like the differences in translation and how words are lost and meanings like change, and where those sort of root words in different languages might come from. And whilst that kind of played into the book, it was very much a fiction that just didn't make sense to me. It's one of those books that I read and I was like, this should be studied at university. Like, I need somebody to guide me through this book and say to me, what do you think's happening there? It's actually, I'll tell you, it's this, this and this. Like, I really found that helpful with some of the books that I read at university that I don't think I would have understood otherwise. I think that, I mean, I can already think of a lecturer who I know would love this book and would absolutely devour it and give you some really great advice when you're reading through it. And I just felt I needed that. I needed more support in understanding what was happening here. I'm not going to say don't read this book, but just go into it with more of an expectation that it's not a book that you can curl up on the sofa and read. It's something that you have to like really devour and annotate and tab away and take long breaks from, and potentially have someone to read it with you. I think because I read it on an ebook as well as an ARC, it wasn't particularly helpful because I couldn't have like physical book in my hand to like flick back and then flick forward again, or to, you know, make notes on the paper and stick little post-it notes in. Because it was on an ebook, I found it very difficult to do any of that, and I think that also turned me off a little bit. But yeah, it was a very strange book that I can't really tell you much about, except that it was a book. Those are the 8 books I read in January. I'm pretty happy with 8 books. It kind of sets me on a good start to try and read 100 books this year. I feel like I had a really mixed month. Like, I had some really amazing 5-star reads, and then I had some that were really like ones that I struggled to get through. But all in all, I'm really happy with the books I read this month. My 2 standout books have to be Love is for Losers and Daughters of Night. If you're going to pick up any of the ones that I have talked about today, those 2 are the ones that I definitely, like, as soon as I read them, I knew they were going to be favourites for a long, long time. So I highly recommend you pick those up and take a look. I want to know what books you've read this month, so comment your favourite book from January below so I have more books to add to my TBR. But yeah, I really enjoyed this month, and I'd love to hear from you if you've read any of these or have any thoughts you want to share. I'd love to hear them, so please comment, like, subscribe, and all of my socials will be in the description, so if you want to find me somewhere else and have like more of a conversation with me, I love talking books, so I 100% would want to do that with you. So please, like, reach out and yeah, let's talk books. Thanks for watching, bye!